Hello, everybody. My name is Dave Jackson, and you're listening to Tales from the Backlog. This is a video games deep dive review podcast where each week I'm joined by a guest to bring a game out of the backlog, play it, and discuss. My guest today is a friend of the show, a game developer, voice actor, content creator for Borderline Entertainment, among lots of other things, and a 70s rock jukebox enthusiast. Welcome to the show, Asa GreenRiver.
Hey, thank you for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you on the show, man. It's been a long time coming to make this happen, but we got a good game, an interesting one to talk about today. Today, we're going to talk about Prey, which is a first-person shooter developed by Human Head Studios and published by 2K Games for various PC systems and Xbox 360 in 2006. And a note, if you've come here looking for Prey by Arkane Studios, please check out episodes 51 and 52 of the podcast for episodes about that game and its Moon Crash DLC. But today we're talking about the one from 2006, the original Prey. Real quick, project lead credit for Prey is to Chris Reinhardt, and we'll have more credits as we go on through the show today. And if this is your first time listening, thank you for stopping by. Here is how spoilers work on Tales from the Backlog. We're not going to spoil the story for a while. We will keep it spoiler-free. There's a timestamp down in the show notes for when spoilers begin. We'll also warn you. So until that point, if you don't want to be spoiled on what happens in this game, you're safe until then. So, what is Prey? We have some quick pitches. I think people nowadays may be a little bit more familiar with the Arkane Studios game from 2017, but this is the original one. My elevator pitch for Prey is System Shock 2 meets Portal and Body Snatchers with a 70s jukebox soundtrack. Yeah. Asa, what's the pitch from you?
See, mine was like Indigenous War of the Worlds with the flair of Quake.
Yeah, dude, there's a lot going on in this game. There's a lot of influences and mechanics and ideas smashed all together in this game. So I think we covered the bulk of them. Maybe add Doom 3 in there and a lot of stuff. So I played this on Xbox 360. It took me about 9 hours to beat. Where did you play this? How long did it take you?
Yeah, so I originally played it on the 360. Couldn't tell you how long it took me that time, but this time I do have the original copy. It's right over there, but I decided I just rebought it on the Series X because I was curious to see, what kind of visual improvements I was going to get from that. And I think in total it probably took me maybe 7 hours.
It's not a super long game, which is I always appreciate that in a first-person shooter for get in, get out, show me what you got, and I don't need a first-person shooter to be 20 hours long or something. So appreciate that with this game. So let's get into our histories with Prey. Now, with the guest always goes first. So you played this a long time before I did too. So tell everybody what originally made you interested in playing this game.
Yeah, so my first introduction to this game was actually on an official Xbox Magazine demo disc. Played the demo and it really clicked with me. I'm Indigenous myself, so immediately when playing through the demo, I was like, "Whoa, this is really a vibe for my culture."
Right.
And I remember initially thinking to myself, we'll get into this later, but I really resonated with Tommy. At the time when I played through the demo, I thought it was a lot of fun. I loved being able to interact with everything. I liked the small details that they had put into it. But the fact that there was so much Indigenous culture at the time, I remember thinking, I'm not ready for this. I would say probably fast forward to the end of the year. I do remember buying it at Best Buy and then, playing it over the holiday and really putting some time into it. So gotcha. I did 7 hours this time. That was just cruising through. I remember my original playthrough, finding secrets, the multiplayer, a lot of different things.
Gotcha. Yeah. This is my first time playing it for the show here. And back in 2006, I had an Xbox 360. I was more into shooters back then than I am now. Halo ruled the world back in 2006. So I was into it, but I never heard about this game when it came out. And mostly, like, honestly, the reason I was interested in playing this was I played Prey from 2017, the Arkane game, and I really, really love that game. And then I got to reading about the development history and how they were kind of forced to take on the name Prey for that game because of this existing IP that Bethesda or ZeniMax had, like, purchased. And so I was like, okay, well, that got me interested. And then I started to read up on it. Oh, it has this, this indigenous story angle, which I had thought, I was like, with 2006, like, that could not have been common back in 2006. So that made me more interested to check it out. And then lately since I bought an Xbox 360 recently, I've been trying to pick up games that are like not super available outside of the Xbox ecosystem, because I don't have an Xbox console other than the 360. So things that have been delisted, things that have not been ported to PC. Prey was originally released on PC, I know, but it's not on Steam. So like, I picked it up. It was cheap in a used game store. So I picked it up, figured I'd play it. It's on my backlog resolutions list for 2025. Make sure I give my Xbox 360 some love. And here we are. Yeah. And it's a really interesting game. Right out front, I don't actually think that like the game aspect of this is very good. As a first-person shooter, I got really tired of this game. Like,
really?
we mentioned all of the influences. You mentioned Quake, and I said Doom 3 and System Shock 2 and Portal, and there's gravity puzzles, and there's all kinds of stuff going on. And like, I think it starts out really strong and then gradually got more and more annoying as it went. So as a shooter, I don't really like this. But as a sci-fi experience, I think it's a kind of fun sci-fi story to go through. And the worst thing that a game can be, if I find the gameplay to be, tiresome, or I'm starting to get tired of it, the worst thing that can happen is for it to be really long. And this game's not. So when I say I started to get tired of it, it was like the last couple hours. I was like, can we wrap this up? And then it did. So we'll get into that for sure. But like, I'm glad I played this. I had a good time with the story, and the other, the indigenous story angle to it was interesting to see, just because like, aside from, there's indie games now that do this kind of stuff. Still not super common, but it was really interesting to see a 2K published AAA game from 2006 with a take on this. Yeah. So, all in all, I didn't love the game. I'm still glad I played it. It's still an interesting game. Like we're going to have our conversation. It's not a boring game by any means. No. Yeah. So what do you think here at the top?
Yeah, no. See, I actually really liked the game. I remember being fond of it, like when I played it previously. And you and I had kind of chatted beforehand, before I did my replay, and I remembered a lot of the key things like you were talking about. And obviously we'll get into those into the show. But as far as like my love of the game, I couldn't remember it a whole lot. But like once I played through, it was really clicking for me. But I think, and this is just like me personally, I think when it comes to shooters, there's like this huge difference between like a modern first-person shooter versus a corridor or a boomer shooter. And this game is like classic formula to a T, a corridor boomer shooter.
Yeah, like, it's straddling that line for sure. Like it's like Halo had come out and kind of like revolutionized how we play shooters, but that wasn't that long before this game came out.
Right. And I think the criticisms are very much warranted, but they really remind me of when the Duke Nukem Forever or whatever it was called came out. And and a lot of folks were like, oh, wow, this is such a disappointment because it's nothing like, a classic first person shooter now. But it wasn't trying to be. It was trying to like keep that old 90s style. But that keeping that old style comes with a lot of luxuries that we're used to, like, or doesn't come with a lot of the luxuries that we were used to in shooters currently. So like, as I was playing through, I found myself like really getting into the groove, like doing strafing, a lot of quick moving. And I found like I would get into a good groove, and then the game would then switch it up, like throw in a different mechanic, maybe slow things down with a puzzle, slow things down with a vehicle segment or something like that. And it felt like it was trying to, hey, let's pull in some of these aspects from like, you know, current games and try to stay relevant. But then like the shooting and everything just gets right back to the core. Like it feels very Serious Sam, you know, feels very Duke Nukem, feels very Doom. And I just love that simplistic, like click shooting, don't really have to think about it. You're just giving me waves of monsters and I'm just cycling through all of my weapons. You know, like there's no reload. It's you're just shooting until you're out of ammo, hitting the pickups, and it, you know, as you progress through the game, you know, we'll talk about like, you get bigger and better weapons. And yeah, it really hit that nostalgia bone for me in that regard.
Yeah, I can totally get that. And it's a good point, kind of like talking about the lineage. When we get into gameplay, we're going to bring up Doom again because of what this game is built out of. And I think that's a good point. And a lot of my issues with gameplay in particular may have been kind of an expectation that I came into it with, knowing when it came out and what had come out before it. So we have a lot to dig into for sure. So we're going to listen to a bit of music from Prey, and when we come back, we're going to set up the story. Prey has primary writing credits to Scott Miller and Human Head Studios as a whole, and in the game you play as Tommy, who is a Cherokee man who served in the U.S. military and is now living back on his home reservation in Oklahoma, disillusioned with his heritage and looking for a way out, a way off of the reservation. Should be noted real quick, Tommy is voiced by Michael Greyeyes, who is a First Nations actor. So it's cool that they got an Indigenous person to voice the main character. And I'm sure that there was some consulting going on with, representation in the game there. So that's cool. I want to shout that out. Good on Human Head for doing that. Tommy is trying to get his girlfriend Jen to leave the reservation with him, but she wants to stay there. She doesn't want to leave her culture behind. She doesn't want to leave her family behind. And as they're kind of talking through this, they're in a bar where Jen is bartending. A pair of bar patrons gets really rowdy. Tommy tells them to stop. They get into a fight. This is when they teach you how to use your wrench. You bash these dudes in the face with the wrench, and then suddenly aliens attack. They start abducting people. The whole bar gets like sucked up into an alien spaceship, and then you wake up captive on the ship.
Probably one of the coolest intros.
Yeah, it is like
really cool.
Because I started playing this. I didn't know what the story was in this game. I knew it was sci-fi, but like, yeah, it's a very cool intro because one moment you're just kind of bashing these rowdy guys in the bar with a wrench, and then suddenly aliens are sucking everybody up into the ship.
With a sick soundtrack, like everything is like, it's very cinematic at the beginning.
Yeah, you have a couple times, and it starts in this kind of opening section where you have licensed music. So you have like the bar jukebox that's playing, I don't know, Judas Priest, You Got Another Thing Coming or something like that as the aliens are sucking everybody up. Or there's another section where Cat Scratch Fever's playing during a fight in like what's remains of the bar inside the alien ship. So thanks to 2K for the licensed music, I suppose. But when you wake up on the ship, Tommy and Jen and Tommy's grandfather are captive on the ship. And you see other captives being killed in brutal fashions. Tommy's restraints kind of fail. He falls out and he's got to go out and find a way to save them. His grandfather gets killed pretty early in the game. It's not a huge spoiler. It's a, half hour maybe into the game. And then you kind of get introduced to like this other side of the story where Tommy falls from a great height inside the ship. He dies, but he wakes up inside the spirit world. And the spirit world and his grandfather's in there. This is a major thing throughout the story. So Tommy is resurrected. He has this spirit guide in the form of a hawk, a spectral hawk named Talon. And so with Talon's help, Tommy's going to go through the ship, try and save Jen, and maybe help the other people on board, try and get back home. So that's the introduction for the story. Now, let's talk about, what I thought was the main draw for this game, which is to have a big AAA production from 2006 with an Indigenous main character and a story that is very much about this character's culture, how he feels about his culture, and the kind of hero's journey that he goes on throughout the game. So, what did you think about this? And obviously, I'm not asking you to speak for anybody other than yourself, but
Yeah.
as an Indigenous person yourself, how did you feel about this, especially when you first played it?
Yeah, when I first played it, like I said, I really connected with Tommy. Like Tommy's feelings of just wanting to leave, for my own personal reasons. In fact, there's a video about that on my YouTube channel. You can kind of learn just like what life was like growing up Indigenous for me. And so I really connected with his feelings as far as the overall representation in the game. I did kind of like have these recollections when I was playing of, the first time I was going through, any time that there was a lot of Indigenous stuff, I kind of felt this twinge inside my body, because I was Tommy at that point. I was, really trying to distance myself from my heritage and my culture. So anytime that was happening, and it happens a lot, it was kind of like this hard pill to swallow. I'm hearing my Kaku's voice in my head. I'm hearing my dad's voice in my head. But now, as somebody who I very much reclaim my culture and embrace it, it was very heartwarming for me. Obviously, it's not a perfect depiction, but it's probably, in my opinion, one of the better that is out there in a non-Indigenous made game. Like I know that the voice actor of Tommy, Michael Grayus, he did consult on the game, and he made sure that they were using the Cherokee language appropriately, and that they were using aspects from the culture in the right way. Now, obviously, like when we get into spoilers, I'll talk more about some of those things, but I think like from a high level view, it was good for me. I really liked it. And I can definitely see myself going back to it just because I want more Indigenous representation, like in games, especially to be a main character. Yeah. So I really enjoyed that.
That's awesome. I love to hear that. It's just good to hear because I see, okay, they're going to make a game about this. But it's not, like you said, it's not a team of Indigenous people making the game. So I always wonder, did they do it right? Were they sensitive? Because I don't really have any basis in it. So it's good to hear you say that for sure. And it's good to hear that you've kind of connected with where Tommy starts, and then later on you connected with where Tommy ends, because he starts out the game very, very disillusioned with the culture, really doesn't want anything to do with it. He wants to get out. There are parts early in the game where his grandfather is begging him to reconnect with the culture, and he's like, I don't care. I'm not going to. Yeah. And then he goes on this hero's journey. So I think we have both sides of this, right? We have people like Tommy who feel that disillusionment. And then we have people like his grandfather who see the young people with the disillusionment, and it's got to be heartbreaking for them. Yeah. Yeah. And then we have that hero's journey as we go through the game.
Wow. It's interesting that you bring the age aspect because, I was obviously a lot younger, 2006, I was still in high school.
Yeah. We were all a lot younger in 2006.
Versus now. Yeah, right. Wow. 2006, versus now I'm almost 40. So, looking back, I kind of, obviously I'm not as old as Tommy's grandfather, but I feel that feeling, that the grandfather is feeling of, man, Tommy, no, it's important now. It's not for every youth, but there are some, like it was for myself, that there is this rejection, and, that obviously comes with a whole host of reasons why. But my only gripe, and I'll get into more detail about it, is the way that Tommy handled his reclamation of his culture.
I think I know exactly what you're talking about, and I had kind of noted that in the spoiler section as well. So We'll revisit that for sure in the spoiler section, but we have a nice tease for anyone who's going to follow us past the spoiler wall here. For other parts about the story, just a couple of quick notes. This was one of, not the first game, but like one of the first, since I played System Shock 2 for the first time, where I played this and I was like, oh, this is System Shock 2, but different, same, but different. There's a lot that I'm not going to like say exactly, but if I say System Shock 2, people are be like, oh, okay, I think I know what you're talking about. You probably do. I don't think that this is as interesting as System Shock 2 when we have those like parallels here, but they do something cool like within that. I'm not going to spoil, but like as a sci-fi story, an alien abduction story, a story where you're on the alien spaceship learning about why are they abducting the people and stuff like that. I thought that was really fun as just a flat out sci-fi story.
Yeah. I'm trying to think of like how do I do this without getting to spoilers, but the comparison to System Shock 2, and honestly, I think that there is more than just that game. I think if you could even look at BioShock 1 in a way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it's like, without like getting into spoilers, it's hard to like draw those comparisons without talking about the very specific, story beats. But I'm not going to say it's not an original story, because it very much is. When you talk about the characters and everything, but it's a very classic scenario, I would say. Yeah, like I think they're not taking too many risks when it comes to that. They're not trying to tell a story like The Matrix where you have to watch it 5 times to really understand the deep meaning.
Right.
You're going to play it and understand it right there.
Exactly.
Because I think even System Shock 2 is a little bit deeper in its storytelling, because it is trying to tell you more of a story.
They definitely have different,
teach you more of a lesson.
Yeah. It's different thematically from System Shock 2 for sure.
Yeah.
That one has like a philosophical kind of thing to it from your different antagonists. Same with BioShock. Prey doesn't really get into like philosophy so much. It's like we have sci-fi and then we have the reclamation of culture, basically. That's what we're dealing with here. One other thing to note about the story, and this is just a cool thing, it's a little story delivery. Like you have a lot of character dialogue and stuff like that, but you also get story about what's happening on the ground from these radio broadcasts where you have these weird fucking people calling into this radio news show and just describing what's going on the ground. And they're just talking about the wildest stuff. And the show host is just very much like, oh, okay, you're saying that, people are coming out of the walls, or tell me more about that. That's not something he says, but I can't remember. But I like, maybe once every couple of chapters, you'll stop at one of these broadcasts and you'll get to listen to this call-in show. And I stopped every time. I thought that was pretty fun.
Yeah. And I think it's worth noting that, if you're listening to this and you want to go play the game, there are some that you can very easily miss. Like they're placed in places for the most part where you'll stumble into them because you need to get refills on things. But there were other ones that I remembered, and I don't know if it's spoiler territory. You have to use some of Tommy's powers, but if you don't notice the emblem at the right time, you might not think to turn on your powers at this moment. And so you can miss like some of those additional story beats. Yeah.
That is one of the things that kind of bothered me the most about this game is I got lost pretty often. And a lot of times it was a combination of, or like one of, either I missed that emblem that says it's time to go into spirit walking, or maybe I missed a portal or something, like, because there's different kinds of portals and some are more obvious than the others. One of the things about this game is that I think it looks very samey as you go through. A lot of the hallways and stuff look exactly the same. And if you're going through a kind of complicated collection of hallways and rooms, and there's one way you're supposed to go, a lot of times I would miss that door. They do mix it up, though. There's a bunch of, set piece visual moments. You walk out of a door and you'll see like this big crazy room, stuff like that. So it's not like the entire game looks exactly the same, but it did contribute to me getting lost from time to time.
And And that, I think, is a design philosophy that comes from those old corridor boomer shooters,
Hmm.
because that's how they all were at that
Yeah.
time. Like, especially
Yeah.
if you go back to the very first Doom, you're walking hallway to hallway, you have no idea where you are. You're just
Right.
running along the wall, pressing the action button, hoping that you're going to open a door. So, like,
Yeah.
you can tell that there had to have been like some old school designers on there, and that they're like, this worked before, and they just kind of like put things there. Because you're right, like they'll, you walk into a room and it'll be like this big arena or like this big space thing, and then you'll go through the same hallways that you're in before,
Hmm.
and then go to a big room that feels kind of different but also is pretty much the same, maybe just upside down.
They do. I mean, they do flip your perspective around too. They have these gravity puzzles, and there are certain ways that you can manipulate gravity sometimes. So that starts to, it might, disorient you even more if you're already disoriented. I did spend what I felt like was too much time not knowing where I was supposed to go, especially for a shooter like this.
Mhm.
You mentioned that kind of old school like design. This game uses the idTech 4 engine that Doom 3 used. So you may mention like some pedigree or something like that. They used the engine, they modified it so that they could do the portal stuff, because Doom 3 didn't have portals. But
Right.
if you look at it, and I've got some good screenshots. Doom 3 is most famous for lighting, introducing lighting, crazy lighting into the series. And I've got some good screenshots from Prey of like really spooky lighting and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a dark place. There's a single light and there's something kind of being silhouetted in that light. Like there's a bunch of cool stuff like that. So shout out to the lead artist on the game is Ruwan Atala. Want to say their names when they do good work or when they lead good work. So that, once I started, I haven't played Doom 3, but I have seen a lot.
Oh.
And so, yeah, I know, right? I bought it in a Steam sale a long time ago, just like everybody else. But when I booted the game up and I kind of saw it, I was like, this looks kind of like Doom 3. And then what do you know? Same engine. So
Yeah.
it's really impressive in a lot of ways.
Have you played Quake 4?
I have not. I've only played the original Quake.
Okay. I think if you ever go to play Quake 4, you're going to be like, wow, this feels like Prey, which feels like
Okay.
Doom 3.
Yeah. The lineage is true for sure.
Yeah.
What did you think about the way the game looks? I've said a lot.
Yeah, I really liked the way the game looks. I love the like really bio mutant looking aliens, the way that they really morphed that into some of the environments. I
The
think when you
ship
got
is kind of alive too, in a way.
yes, yeah, it's one feels like one living organism. Everything kind of feels tied together, and
Hmm.
you kind of feel that visually. I think that some of the level design, and the environment was made for the puzzles. So the reason they
Hmm.
kept a lot of it, pretty uniform, not only was an old design philosophy, but was also to help some of these puzzles. Because, like you said, you're switching up gravity, moving
Hmm.
from wall to wall, and if everything is drastically different, wall, ceiling, and floor, you can't really do that.
Yeah.
Um, and so, I think just about every area had something, kind of special going on with it. But yeah, I really enjoyed the look of it. I do wish that we had more, like when you entered into the spirit world, I wish we had a little bit more of that. Like
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
Tommy talks to his grandfather, that would have been cool to see, because that was always at least for me, I reckon you probably feel the same way, was like a nice like palette swap, like a nice
Oh yeah.
palette change to go from
Yeah.
like the
Yeah.
space to like, this desert plateau, red rock canyon kind of feel.
Hmm.
Uh, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, for sure. It looks nice, and like you said, you've been doing ship hallways for so long that something that looks very different is always welcome when it comes up, for
Yeah.
sure. You mentioned the kind of like living quality to the spaces and stuff. The guns you pick up are also really weird and like, alive too. And they've got weird, maybe this one's got weird tentacles on it or like a claw or something like that. Or it's just very obviously like this is organic material that these guns are made out of. So that's a cool visual design choice. as
Oh
well.
yeah. Especially when Tommy stands idle for a little bit too long, he'll
Yeah.
kind of play with the little aliens that are on the gun. They might snap his finger
Yeah.
and he like wiggles it off and
Wouldn't we all? Yeah. The only other thing I wanted to mention about the visuals is as you go through the story and the story starts to pick up and you start to realize what's going on the ship, you will notice and I learned a word for this, I forgot to write it down, so I'm just going to say a very vaginal look to a lot of the places on the ship. It plays into the story in a way, but it is very strange, we will
Mhm.
say. And it's weird sci-fi when you get to this kind of thing. But playing through the game, looking at the way the hallways look, looking at the places where the monsters come from, it's odd. You will notice it.
And you'll notice it and be like, wow, something's off about that. And then
Yeah.
it's not until the later sections where you're like, okay, so they know that it looks like that, right?
Oh yeah.
And then
Yeah.
it's not until much later than that that you're like, if you even think about it, because they don't tell you, you're like, okay, so I kind of get why everything was like that before.
hmm We'll save that until the
Yeah.
spoiler section when we talk about why that is the way it is. Talking about the music next, the original music in the game was composed by Jeremy and Julian Soule. I don't know how to say their name, so hopefully I'm saying it correctly. This is what I get for trying to give people credit on the show, is I'm going to say some names wrong from time to time. The original music I didn't find was like super noteworthy. I like the main menu theme a lot. It's probably the one I listen to the most, obviously. Kind of like a heroic type of thing. You have the the eagle screeching in the theme and stuff like that. I didn't notice the music a whole lot in here. It's not a bad thing. It's
Mhm.
just not one of these games where I finished the soundtrack and was like, wow, the music blew me away.
Yeah.
As far
Yeah.
as the original music goes, did you have any thoughts about the original music?
I saw your note and I was like, wow, I kind of feel the same way. But also, Jeremy Soule does a lot of Elder Scrolls music, so
Mm,
the pedigree is there. And then I looked up the soundtrack on Spotify, and I'm like, oh wow, like there is like the main theme and some of the other tracks really have some energy to them and really have
hmm
some personality. But I feel like during gameplay, they were very underplayed. Like, I
Yeah,
don't remember hearing music predominant, like very, very loudly unless it was coming from the jukebox.
right.
Like if it was licensed music, it's like they turn that dial all the way up so you could hear it versus, I didn't really notice I heard any music until I was sitting idle really quick, like to go like grab
hmm
a sandwich or something. And I came back because I was in a hallway and I was like, oh, there's music playing. But I like
Yeah.
just hadn't really noticed before.
Yeah. It's a lot of like moody stuff in the background, which again is not it's not saying that the music sucks or anything like that. It's just didn't stand out a lot of times. What does stand out is the licensed music, like you said, a couple times, like when the aliens first attack, it's later here in the notes. It's "Don't Fear the Reaper" that's playing on the jukebox as the
Yes.
aliens are
Yeah.
attacking,
Oh
and
my
then
god.
later on, you'll find that same jukebox inside the ship because the ship just kind of vacuumed everything up, and like it's playing Cat Scratch Fever as you have a firefight with aliens in the remains of the bar, and like those are great. Like 2K published games like Spec Ops: The Line did this too, where you'll have like
Mhm.
firefights and Hush by Deep Purple's playing and stuff. Like this game has those moments too, and it's
Yeah.
cool. Like fuck Ted Nugent, but I like having a firefight with Cat Scratch Fever playing in the background.
Yeah.
So it's fun when those come in. They don't overdo it, but when they do, it's fun.
Mhm. And it feels like a little audio treat because
Yeah,
they
for sure.
really don't do it often.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's pretty front loaded. It might be one of the
Mhm.
reasons why the back half of the game started to blend together to me more because it was like
Yes.
more fights with less, super memorable stuff like Judas Priest playing while I'm fighting
Mhm.
or something like that.
Right, because, in the talking about that intro sequence, um, when Don't Fear the Reaper's playing, like, it really adds so much to the moment because
hmm
you have these tractor beams coming down,
yeah.
everybody's screaming, things are getting ripped away while this song is just blasting out of the jukebox. And so it really creates a moment. And there are plenty of, thinking back through the gameplay, there's plenty of moments throughout this game where if they wanted to just go that route, they should have just made the jukebox appear again and like
Yeah,
pick a
magic
different
jukebox.
track,
Yeah.
because I'm thinking like when you get one of the guns later in the game, like that fight is
Hmm.
a pretty significant like fight. And in fact, like all the boss fights are moments where like, wow, a song would have really fit right here.
Yeah.
If not a licensed song, then like the soundtrack really needs to be elevated because this is an intense moment.
Hmm. For sure. Agreed. I think there's just a lot of stuff like, but maybe like before the final boss fight, but like after the halfway point in the game, they could have just used a little something extra to make it more memorable. And I think music is an easy way, I think, to do that
Yeah.
in a lot of
Yeah.
cases. I'm looking at the credits right now. So in addition to You Got Another Thing Coming, Cat Scratch Fever, Don't Fear the Reaper. There's also Barracuda by Heart is in this game. Free Ride by the Edgar Winter Group also in this game. A bunch of other songs. So if you enjoy that era of rock, there's also an MXPX song which doesn't fit with the rest of the rest of it. 2006 MXPX was hot in 2006.
Yeah.
So if you enjoy this like this 70s 80s jukebox era of rock, I think you'll find a lot of cool stuff in the soundtrack.
And I think it's worth noting that you can interact with the jukebox and change up the song.
Yeah. You can interact with the jukebox and the video poker machine if you want some achievements. Yeah.
Yeah, you can play entire mini games, and they're not shy about putting in some of that product placement.
Right. Let's listen to a bit of music. Probably not the licensed one. I don't want to get in trouble, but we'll listen to a bit of music. We'll come back and we'll talk about what it's like to play Prey. Prey is a first-person shooter, as we talked about before. And as I mentioned before, but just to reiterate, it's a first-person shooter, but the guns that you get are not, they're not always easily mapped onto traditional first-person shooter guns. The only weapon from Earth that you pick up is the wrench that you start the game with. And you keep that wrench forever. All the other guns are alien. Like some of them feel similar. The first gun you pick up is kind of like a carbine type of gun. There's something that is like kind of like a rocket launcher, kind of like a grenade launcher, but it's not like they're not exact. They're not just like, oh, it's just like a grenade launcher, but with an alien skin on it. Like they're kind of weird guns. There's another where you can like vacuum up effects like plasma effects or electricity or what's the word, cold air, I can't think of anything better to say, and then shoot it out cryo energy, and then shoot it out. So like that's a pretty unique gun. So overall the gun selection, every time I picked up a new gun I was like, what is this thing? How do I use this? It's fun.
To me the gunplay was a blast. I absolutely love it. But again, let me preface it with, I love those old style of games. You're not hitting triangle or Y to just like swap to your next gun or using the D-pad to use a weapon wheel. It's the classic, just like scroll through the top. And when it's out of ammo, you're just popping over to the next one because they really just want you to just like shoot. And I think it's worth noting also that all guns sound immaculate. The sound design for each weapon sounds so good. And you talk about having an analog for the shotgun or the minigun or something like that. The shotgun was like my biggest gripe in this game. I love the effects, I love the sound effects, but I also just miss that punchy sound of a shotgun. This one has like that oozy splashing vial as it's shooting out acid that does damage over time, but not that much damage over time.
I didn't know it does damage over time. That's how little it does.
Yeah, like it really is so minuscule. And I think it's also worth noting, like from a game design perspective, that the way that it doles these guns out to you
Mm-hmm.
is very similar to how, like, for example, Mario games used to teach you how to do platforming with the level design. Like
Mm-hmm.
each level teaches you a little bit of a new thing because it builds off the last. You know, each gun that you get is introduced at a certain time to show you its effectiveness against the environment and the
Mm-hmm.
enemies. So like when you're getting the big guns towards the end or at a big set piece, they're really telling you these are the guns that you need for these kinds of enemies.
Mm-hmm.
So like you start to get into this, you know, ammo preservation or like just quick switching through. Like it got to the point where I kind of remembered by hitting RB and LB, like, all right, if I'm using the shotgun, I need to hit LB 3 times to get to the basic carbine rifle, and then
Mm-hmm.
LB once to get over to the energy one. So, but yeah, I really digged the weapons. The sound design again was phenomenal for them, and I just wish that there were more. I think
Yeah.
the weapon selection was great, but they're so fun. You know, at least like, you know, getting to use them was fun. I wish that they would have just kept going and just kept adding weapons.
Yeah. You only pick up like 6, guns throughout the whole game, 6 or
Yeah.
7, something like that. So there's not that many. About 1 an hour as you play, basically.
Mhm.
So I didn't like the gunplay that much. It felt kind of sloppy and hard to aim for me. Part of it was because I really wanted, and maybe it's the presentation of this versus a Quake, or if I'm playing the original Doom, I'm not gonna like ask for this, but I really wanted to look down the sights, especially
Mm.
with the carbine rifle or the rocket launcher type gun that you pick up. But all of these guns have 2 functions. So you use the regular ammo with the right trigger. The left trigger will do whatever the alternate function is. So that
Mhm.
carbine that you pick up is also a sniper rifle, and the left trigger will bring up like the sniper sights. But that's not useful if you're just trying to aim down a hallway. It's very
Right.
useful at
Right.
certain points, but not useful all the time. And then the other games, or the other weapons, the shotgun, etc., you can't look down the sights at all. And I really wanted that in this game. It felt,
Mhm.
maybe it's just because the way the game looks, but it looks like a game that should have down sights aiming, like Halo or something like that.
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
as you say, like I think you mentioning that you played this basically as of a newer boomer, like an HD boomer shooter, basically. That
Yeah.
kind of unlocked for me why there is no look down the sights aiming. So that
Yeah.
makes sense. I still I had a really hard time aiming a lot of times in here, and I was like, if I could just like fine tune this a little bit, I'd be
Yeah.
golden. But something about like, from the hip aiming in first person shooters never feels great. I mean, in a
Mhm.
lot of games, you're disincentivized from doing that in the first place. So that was
Yeah.
like the main thing where I was like, this didn't feel great to me to play.
Yeah. I think like when it comes to the design of the game, as far as like, you know, how the weapons work, um, you get to a lot of points where you've got some long distances to cover when it, you know, taking out enemies. And it really feels like I can't overstate enough the feeling of this is an old school shooter coming out in 2006 when
Yeah,
Halo and Call of Duty have already existed.
right.
Um, and so the aiming really feels like Perfect Dark. It feels like GoldenEye on the Nintendo
Mm,
64. You are playing from the hip, but when you have to aim, you really need to like stop and aim when it comes to that carbine rifle. Like slow down, stop, zoom out, like go really slow. But it's a frantic shooter, so there's really no place for that.
yeah,
So
you have to move. Yeah.
you're trying to slow down and do precision aiming while you're just having a bullet hell situation, and it like just doesn't work. And even when they put you in scenarios where, hey, this is sniper alley and there's snipers everywhere and clearly they're telling you to do the same thing, you can't stop to shoot one to line it up when everyone is shooting you at the same time.
Right.
So I think they just kind of like added in things that didn't really work for this type of shooter. I think when it came to the mobs, the hallways, the corridors, the bosses, the arenas, the shooting was great. For me
Yeah.
in that regard, because I know what I'm expecting and there's no bullet drop off. It's all hit scan. Obviously, like when you get into like the energy weapon, if you absorb like the red one, it just kind of like shoots out everywhere and is kind of a waste of time. Um,
The lightning's
um,
real strong though.
the lightning and the sun rays are the best.
Yeah.
The cold is great when you're up close, but again, that's another thing where you're not always up close, so it
Mm.
feels like kind of a waste of time. Same with like the red. I know I just kind of like dogged on it, but the red energy is very powerful, but
Yeah.
only really at a close range situation. But you don't get enough of those in the appropriate areas for it to feel right.
Yeah, I agree. And you're with that energy weapon specifically, you're at the mercy of like, they put a refill station right in front of this room. What kind of ammo is it? That's the one I'm taking into the next fight. Like you don't store separate tanks of,
Yeah.
some of each of these different types of energy. So if the shooting to me felt a little bit sloppy, sometimes the encounters were a little out of control, especially later in the game. Like I hated the last couple levels, just of the amount of enemies, the amount it took to kill each enemy.
Yeah.
They introduced these enemies with these bubble shields that make a very funny sound effect when you shoot it, but they're very annoying to fight as enemies. So
Yes.
it got into like this game got pretty tough and I didn't feel like I was like very good at it a lot of times. They have this really interesting thing here where I think they tried to counteract difficulty a little bit by giving you this unique death mechanic. Tommy can't die in this game. There are no game overs in Prey. If you run out of health, Tommy will go back to the spirit world and you'll get put in this shooting gallery with the spirit bow that you have. You can also switch into spirit form and use the bow. But in this kind of death mechanic, you have to use the bow and you shoot these red and blue flying spirits to refill your spirit energy and then your health. And every time you die, you go to this thing, you shoot some of these things, Tommy gets dragged into this pit, and then you get spit back out in the real world in the middle of the fight that you were just doing. So I was pretty conflicted by this throughout playing. I appreciated not having game overs because, I wasn't having a great time with the shooting, but also this felt like busy work at a certain point in the game to just go do the shooting gallery for 30 seconds so that you can get back into the fight. I would rather them just tone down the fights and have deaths and checkpoints, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of conflicted on those as well, because in some areas I liked them because they felt like a tactical point for me of how I got to let me try and fill up my health gauge as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And I know we'll kind of get into it later, but I found more uses for the spirit walking and the bow throughout the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so then I was like, okay, well, and as soon as you hit one of those creatures, you start to get pulled back into the middle.
Yeah.
So then it's this fight of I got to fill up my gauges really quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of did a couple things for me. It had me really prioritizing, which do I want to fill up, more red or more blue?
Mm-hmm.
But then also, and this was just me, it really helped refine my aiming and shooting, because you're
That's
kind of
true.
in this no stress situation where you're able to use the shooting mechanics and just kind of get used to the little bit of acceleration that they seem to have with the aiming. And so it kind of kept me warmed up, versus like if I were to die, there's the game over screen, the maybe selecting your load, the getting back into it.
Mm-hmm.
And it, there was no like, all right, I got to warm back up. It's just I'm shooting and then I'm right back to more shooting.
Yeah. I think the best part about this is, like you said, it's not that long. You never stop playing the game.
Yeah.
It's just a different thing that you have to go do. Like Legacy of Kain Soul Reaver has this type of thing too, and I hated it in that game because it was a lot more tedious than gallery shooting with the bow. Like there's
Yeah.
just like a very simple pleasure in playing a gallery shooter. Like I like that, Legend of Zelda shooting gallery type challenges. Like I'll do those all day. And this
Yeah.
game's really similar to that. It's just like there were times when I was like, I don't want to go do this every single time,
Mhm.
but also I'm kind of glad that they did it this way because I would rather not start this encounter over from the beginning if I'm not
Right.
enjoying the encounters in the first place. So like,
Yeah.
I don't think it's a perfect system, but I also appreciated it because I was having less fun with the baseline shooting, and especially in the later levels where it's just like, we're just going to fill this room with like the most powerful enemies. There's a bunch of them. You might be
Yeah.
hard up on ammo, so you might need those spirit bow recharges. And the only way to recharge it is going to be to die and, get your spirit gauge filled up and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
it did feel tedious sometimes, but I did also like just, I don't want to get a game over and start this thing over again.
Mhm.
So I'm kind of glad it's here. I think I'm still at the point where it's like, just tone some of the encounters down
Yeah.
and then maybe just have traditional checkpoints. I don't know. I'm just going to keep repeating myself.
No, I mean, the difficulty does really ramp up. And even though you're getting these more and more powerful weapons, with the ammo being so scarce, you don't necessarily at times feel all powerful
Right.
as you really should feel. And, honestly, and it's not until the very end that at least I did, like those sun ray stations were
Oh yeah.
everywhere.
Yeah.
Because they knew that that's the most powerful weapon in the game, and you need all of that all the time.
Right.
And it's like, oh, this is the end of the game, and I'm just now kind of feeling powerful, but I only feel powerful if I'm using this one gun versus
right. And it runs out pretty quick. So
yeah. Like if you look at something like, Doom Eternal, kind of taking Doom into now, you're also upgrading your character as well. So
Mhm.
like you're getting stronger weapons, but you're also improving to take damage, but that doesn't really happen in the game. And even the power up that you do get to level up Tommy, it's a shield that goes out so fast. Like it almost is non-existent.
Yeah. So there is another aspect to it, which is something we both kind of touched on, which is this spirit walking mechanic. So if you press Y, Tommy will kind of project a spectral version of himself out into the world. And it's used in puzzle solving to get past barriers that Tommy's, physical body can't go through. But while you're in this spirit form, you can also shoot enemies with the spirit bow. So you said that you found a kind of tactical use for this.
Yeah. So weak enemies, mainly the drones, they'll take one headshot, and they're down with the bow. So that was always nice to like, if I don't want to take damage as Tommy and I walked into a room and I was like, oh, I'm literally about to die, I would kind of back out, go behind the door to where it was like just open, but they couldn't see my body, turn into spirit version, and then go in and then just kind of pop off headshots and then just keep doing that. There was also, when you're in the spirit form, if you shoot an enemy, they react to you, like you get aggro. So
Right.
there was also this, I don't even know if they intended it this way. Like I would be in an intense firefight, but I wanted some of them off of me. I would then turn into spirit Tommy real quick, run over here, just shoot some arrows to get them to turn around, to then quickly hit Y. And some of those like take so long to turn their laborious bodies around that then I would just blast them in the back until they were gone.
That's smart. Yeah, because Tommy's physical body doesn't follow you when you're in that form.
Right.
Those are good use cases for it. And I definitely appreciated the spirit version drawing aggro, especially in a couple of like those later levels. I wish that this was a more viable way of just like fighting, because If the spirit version gets hit, you get thrown back into your physical body. Or if your physical body gets hit while you're in spirit form, you also get thrown back. So like in like a super busy fight, it wasn't always the best way. And like, I don't know, maybe if they had just made your physical body take HP damage if it got hit when you were out there, but you could like stay out in physical or the spirit form and, you know, shoot the bow. Cause like you said, the bow's pretty powerful and you might be able to draw some aggro off of you that way. In the late levels, it was kind of a toss up whether I could actually get that, you know, that spirit walk to actually be useful, or if I would like pop out, immediately get hit and get thrown back into the physical body. So it's kind of like sometimes, sometimes not. But it's kind of up to you how much you want to use it in combat. The primary use for it is puzzles. And this game has a ton of puzzles, and a ton of puzzle mechanics, we'll say, that they throw together. Like you've got the portals, you've got the gravity puzzles, you've got using the spirit world to navigate places where Tommy can't go. How did you feel about the puzzles in here?
You know, I thought they were a lot of fun. Some of them were challenging. There was only one puzzle. And again, I've played this before. So I would come to a puzzle and go, okay, I kind of remember this, and would just kind of fumble my way through it or just, you know, breeze through. But there was one puzzle in particular that I was like, okay, I remember this thing, but I do not remember how to solve this. And it was the only time that I was like, okay, I need somebody on the internet because I'm losing my patience. And as soon as I heard the first little bits of how the puzzle works, turned it right off because I was like, oh yeah, that's right. And, you know, jumped right into it. But some of the puzzles were actually pretty challenging, and they really saved, I feel, the hardest puzzles for the latter half of the game. Which, you know, take it or leave it. It's like the game is also a lot busier towards the second half. And so it's like, does it feel like you're taking a break from hectic moments, or does it feel like you're losing momentum in the story? You know, it's just kind of glass half full or half empty, how you want to look at it. I enjoyed them, and, you know, would kind of take it as that moment of give me a break from all of that hellish shooting that I was getting. Like in the ship segments, I was like, I need a break.
Yeah. It's a lot. Like, I didn't think that the puzzles themselves were like that hard. A lot of times I'd run into trouble and get stuck because I just couldn't see something. Like a portal had opened in a corner of the room that I didn't go in. And so I missed the portal. And that would be like, you know, I'm running around. I'm like, what the fuck am I supposed to do? Oh, there's a thing over there that I missed. Or later on, they give you these parts where you pilot a little ship, and they give you these big, huge spaces to pilot the ship. But the signaling for where you're supposed to go isn't always the best. So I'd be like, piloting the ship around, just kind of looking like trying to find those little pads where you could land them. And it was like, if I found one, hopefully that's where I'm supposed to be. And it usually was, but I felt really aimless in the process of doing those. But the actual puzzles themselves, there was only like one or two that I like legitimately couldn't figure out. And it was because I couldn't figure out the puzzle, not because I had missed something in the environment that caused me to get stuck. I would say missing things in the environment was the bigger issue than being stumped.
Yeah. I think especially like you had mentioned with those ship segments, if you don't see a blue door or one enemy shooting at you from far away, you do kind of like look around aimlessly, because this game does not hold your hand at all when it comes to like where are you supposed to go, what are you supposed to do. And I think if I didn't have that muscle memory, it would have taken me a lot longer. Because man, I think it was not the last ship segment, but probably the one right before it. I knew I needed to ascend, but I'm like, I can't remember where I'm supposed to be flying. And I'm up and down and all around, and there's nothing guiding me. And this whole time I'm seeing this one portal that is on some platform. And I'm just thinking I already went through that. That was me. But you know, in some games, if you're idling too long or you're not moving forward, you might see a little hint that pops up that just kind of reminds you what you're doing. I think even something like that would have been nice to kind of say, hey, we can tell that you've been doing this circling business for
Uh-huh.
hours. Look that way. Like that,
Yeah.
that's, you know, do something like that.
Yeah,
But
it's
yeah,
it's a solitary game, so you don't have like anyone that's going to, give you advice. There are no markers for where you're supposed to go. I never paid so much attention to like, is that door lit up or is it
yeah,
dark? Because if it's lit up, I probably have to use it. And
yeah,
especially in those ship sections where you have like those big circular doors, it was like, let me just try to find something that's like fluorescently lit up. That's
right.
probably where I'm supposed to go. And a lot of times that actually was. But that feels like me digging into like, I know how game developers are going to try and catch my eye, less
Yeah,
so than like intuitively figuring it out as like a space that I'm working through in the game. I mean,
yeah.
I got there, so I'm not that mad, but
I think it's also worth noting that Talon actually does in the corridor segments semi go where you need to go.
yeah, he'll land on like computer consoles if you have to interact with them. Like
Yeah,
they might not stick out super well, but he'll go and land on them. So you're like, oh, there's something there.
yeah. But the problem is that Talon will also just land on monitors to help you read the alien language.
Yes.
So in one point, Talon's landing on some computer screen for a button that you need to push. But if you step a little bit this way, Talon's now going to get up and leave and stand on this monitor over here that just has some gibberish. And now you know it says, oh, the ship's battery's at 30%. And you're like, that doesn't help me
Yeah.
whatsoever.
Right.
Where were we supposed to go? So it's like,
Yeah.
yes, Talon is there to like semi, very semi guide you,
Hmm.
but you can't really trust it all the
Yeah.
time.
The other thing, this is just real quick about the gameplay in the puzzles, is this game has these gravity walkways. When they're powered up, you can walk up the walls, you can walk on the ceiling as long as you stay on these walkways. And so a lot of the puzzles are like, you need to activate those, then figure out where you're supposed to go on those, and that will help you get to the next part of the level. But you'll also do combat on those as well, and
Yeah.
it's always cool to be on the side that's dealing this out, as opposed to it happening to you. But it's always cool when an enemy is on one of those walkways. Say you're standing on the side of the room, and then you kill that enemy and it goes flying off in the direction of normal gravity as opposed to the walkway gravity. Always
Yeah.
satisfying to see them, because you kind of forget like which way is actually up and down when you're on
Yeah.
those. So to see the enemy just like fall straight down or, shoot up into the sky seemingly, is a cool
Yeah.
little thing. I always got a little like ha 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 out of me.
Yeah. I love those moments where, a few enemies would come in and then you would shoot one of those platforms. And it's like Tommy knows because he shot it that he has to flip his body to land.
Right.
But the enemies are always surprised and they just fly down
Yeah.
and smash and die.
Yeah. Yeah. Tommy
I'm
lands
like,
like a cat. The enemies don't.
yeah. And it's like, isn't this your ship? Don't you know that these do this?
Yeah. Yeah. So, before we get into spoilers, I think we're getting toward that point. Asa, do you have any wrap up thoughts about Prey? And then can you answer the question, what kind of person would you recommend go seek out and play this?
Yeah. First and foremost, I think Prey is a real gem, particularly from an Indigenous perspective, because we just don't have as somebody who has consulted on games for Indigenous representation and then
Mm-hmm.
subsequently had the developer say we're not going to do those changes,
Mm.
um, it is hard to like really get to see yourself in a character. And here is this was me, like I really resonated with Tommy. So I think it tells a good Indigenous perspective story as well as just being a fun sci-fi thing. So that's like
Mm-hmm.
my big thing for Prey. And then like who would I recommend it to? If you have any interest in old school shooters, like you have an affinity for retro games, because technically this is retro now.
Yeah.
Um, Being almost 20 years old, I would recommend this game if you like Serious Sam, if you like
Mm.
Doom and Duke Nukem, and you can get down with those games. Like maybe find, I don't know if any of those are on Game Pass, but um, especially Serious Sam, I think like that's a really great example of how those games are to be played. Because if you're going from Call of Duty or Halo Infinite to this, you're going to be sorely disappointed, and you're going to have a terrible time because they're just not meant to control that way.
Mm-hmm.
They're not meant for precision. They're meant for frantic shooting. The level design again doesn't know that sometimes, but once you like get into the groove, or if you like those other games, you'll be able to like instantly like see that and resonate with it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll echo what you said, and especially I appreciate the endorsement from the Indigenous perspective of just this is something that you feel did a pretty good job. And I think we have some stuff to talk about after the spoiler wall, but it is heartening to hear that, because I wouldn't expect it from something that came out in 2006.
Yeah.
It just wasn't, there wasn't the kind of focus. Not that the industry's super focused on it now, but definitely not back in 2006. So that's
Right,
good to
right.
hear for sure. For me, I kind of just like was playing this game and I was really just thinking like, they don't make games like this anymore, like
No.
this type of shooter. I mean, there's the boomer shooter resurgence, but they're all going for, the old PlayStation look, the old Quake, original Quake type look, think of Dusk or something like
Yeah.
that. You don't get stuff that looks like this and plays like this and has this bizarre mishmash of puzzle mechanics and stuff like that all together very often anymore. So like it really feels like a game from its time when you're playing
Mhm.
it. It
Yeah.
feels like an Xbox 360 ass game. So even as you said, it might feel a little bit older than that, but
Yeah.
the whole experience feels really rooted in like this era of games for me. So if you like this era and you missed it, I think you should check it out. Even if I had kind of a less than satisfactory experience with the shooting, and I don't think it controls great. I didn't really enjoy it, but there's a lot of other unique and cool stuff about the game where even if I was like, especially in the late levels, I was really dreading the next encounter because I knew it was going to be some bullshit I wasn't going to have fun with. But I was interested in like, how's the story going to wrap up? I was interested in like, what fucked up alien am I going to see next? Am I going to get another jukebox combat sequence? Like, there's a bunch of cool stuff here. So
Yeah.
it's not that I'm like, this game's dog shit and you should never play it. I'm not even close to that, despite having some misgivings about, the combat getting lost and stuff like that. So
Mhm.
it's a really unique game. It's an interesting game. And I don't think I've ever played another game like it. So if you value
Yeah.
that, then Prey is definitely one of those.
And if you want to play a game that is very similar, that is a 90s controlled game and a 2000s landscape, like I think Duke Nukem Forever that came out on the Xbox 360 as well,
Mm-hmm.
like one of those that felt like it didn't age well at the time, like it just didn't fit with everything. And
Mm-hmm.
that's kind of Prey, like it feels old school while trying to be new school, and it just kind of is it.
Yeah. Yeah. I wouldn't say it like fully succeeds at either of those things, but it
Yeah.
is like it is Prey, and it's definitely a unique thing. So it's not that expensive if you have an Xbox console. Physical copies are like $10, so you can go pick it up. Can you buy it digitally on the Series X store? Do you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. That's what I did. And it was
There
like
you go.
$15. Like,
Yeah.
was not expensive.
Shout out to Xbox for backwards compatibility. They're crushing it there. So that's
Yeah.
cool that you can just go pick it up if you don't have an Xbox 360 anymore.
And it is on PC. I just checked. It's not on Steam. It's one of those you download the client to your computer and just run it straight off of there.
Gotcha. Right on. All right. Well, both of us, we have some kind words to say. We think that this game would appeal to a lot of people, even if it's not a perfect game, but a lot of people probably would be interested in something about it. So we have our housekeeping that we do before we jump into spoilers, and we always start with the guest. So as I said at the top of the show, Asa does a lot of stuff out there. So Asa, please tell the people what you do, where they can find you, perhaps if they want to hire you for some cool stuff.
Yeah. So first, where to find me? You can find me on pretty much all major social media platforms. Some of them I don't use too much anymore. So if you find me on there and you send me a friend request and I never get back to you, don't take it personally. I just am not using it. I use Blue Sky pretty much all the time for my personal use. Any other platform is typically for work. And then where can you find like stuff that I do? You can go to youtube.com/borderline entertainment. That's probably going to be the best place to go. Like if you just want to watch some of my old stuff. Occasionally content is coming out. I do regularly put shorts out because I put stuff on my TikTok. You can find me there, and I do put content on there as well. I'm just kind of in limbo with TikTok right now, not sure like how much I'm going to be using the platform. But I do have relevant things on there, and that's where the most recent content is. And I will probably still upload things. And then in the future, once I get my PC all together, twitch.tv/borderline entertainment is where you'll be able to see live streams. But I have a ton of backlogs of content. If I can find a way to edit it, that stuff is slowly going on to YouTube. So yeah. And then I do a lot of things because I'm neurodivergent as hell and I can't focus on one thing at a time. So I just try to do everything all at once. So I do voice acting. You can find me on Voice 123 and CCC and Backstage and all of those. If you want to see voice samples, or you can just email me, Asa GreenRiver @gmail.com, and I can, connect with you. And then I do video game consultation, more related around, if you're making a game with an Indigenous person, or, a Black person, or, anything like that. Like if I can help you make a more authentic character with my culture, that's what I've done. I do have a handful of games under my belt. And yeah, so you've got my email. You can reach out to me there as well.
Awesome. Well, I'll definitely recommend, if there's something that Asa can help you with, I'll definitely recommend reaching out to him and getting his help. You're a great guy. I appreciate having you on here. And any way that people can find the stuff that you make, whether it's YouTube, Twitch in the future, like you said, or maybe consulting or voice acting or something like that, I'll really recommend people take you up on that. And I'll put links. Yeah, I'll put links to all that stuff down in the show notes so people can easily find you, Blue Sky profile and stuff like that. So you don't have to remember what people say. Yeah.
Yeah. And, one other thing I completely forgot. I'm also a game developer.
Right.
So I'm solo deving a tabletop game. It's a multiplayer, basically like a multiplayer hero shooter. Imagine Overwatch, Marvel Rivals, but in tabletop format. And I really developed it to feel that way. And I'm putting updates out there. It's funny, like I try to put updates on TikTok when I'm working on it, but because I do so much all the time, it just kind of like those like turn-based RPGs where you see the queue of the enemies and like when the things are coming up. That's kind of like what my brain's like. So it's like, all right, well, I'm doing this right now, but I know the queue is coming up for when I will jump back into my game and I'm doing something there. only because it's impossible for your brain to do multiple things, 100% all the time.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So
yeah.
TikTok is a place to see updates on that.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah. Where can people go to find updates on the game? So TikTok is the place.
Yep, that's the best place right now. I am working with some folks to help just showcase it more as I'm making more assets for it, and I'm desperately trying to find a publisher because the game is done and it just needs to come out.
Gotcha. Okay, cool. Well, if anyone listening can help out with that, hit Asa up and see if you can help. So again, I'll put links to all that stuff down in the show notes so people can easily find you and all the stuff that you do. And then for this show, if you want to support the podcast, please consider leaving a rating and review if you're listening to the podcast on Apple or Spotify or Podcast Addict. If you're watching on YouTube, please, like, subscribe, leave comments. All of those things will boost the show and help new people find it. And that's what we want. If you want to support monetarily, patreon.com/realdavejackson is the place to do that. As little as $2 per month will get you voting rights for games I do on the show. You'll get some bonus episodes sometimes. And then as the tiers goes up, so do the treats. So patreon.com/realdavejackson. And with that being said, we are going to take a break. And when we come back, it will be full spoiler time for Prey. All right, everybody, before we get into spoilers for Prey, I have an announcement for a guest appearance I did on another show that you should check out and the customary thank yous. First of all, I was on the most recent episode of the Retro Hangover podcast talking about Psychonauts, my first time playing Psychonauts, and I joined Chris and Shane over on Retro Hangover to break it all down. We had a great time, and I hope you check that episode out. There will be a link down in the show notes for that on Retro Hangover. And as always, I'd like to say thank you to the patrons who help support what I'm doing. Big shout out. Thank you, Chris Nelson, the Top 3 Podcast crew, Zulgeek, Chris Copleen, Eric Guess, Rick Firestone, Nick Fakori, Jill, Soccer, Cupcake, Kyle, Christian S., Matt aka Stormageddon, JD, Doug Leaf, Jason Emery, Brian Skirsha, Jenny E., Marcus O'Neill, Stefan, Drellish, Rob Smith, Rigamort, Silcanet, Ashton Ruby, Levi, Offshore Meteor, a new patron, Bluegrass Hustler, and many more. Thank you all for your support. It means the world to me that you choose to support the work that I'm doing like this. If anyone out there would like to join them, once again, the place to do that is patreon.com/realdavejackson. And with all that being said, let's go back. Full spoilers coming up for Prey. All right, we're back, and it's full spoiler time for Prey. And before we start, I want to give the customary warning that we are not going to go strictly in chronological order. We're going to kind of talk loosely in that order, but if we spoil something that comes at the end, that's fair game too. So if you haven't played, you should not listen beyond this sentence. Okay, so Prey. I thought what we learn about what's actually going on the ship is just a cool sci-fi story that then sets Tommy up to like go on the hero's journey, because he spends a lot of the game just focused on rescuing Jen. He doesn't give a shit about reconnecting with his heritage or anything like that. He just wants to get Jen out of there. And so for most of the game, what we're exposed to is figuring out what this ship is, what's going on here. And you mentioned in the non-spoiler part that Talon eventually will start to land on these monitors, video screens, etc., with the alien language and let you read it. And so you'll start to read them, and you'll start reading a bunch of stuff referring to this character called Mother. Mother will guide us. Mother is aware of protein diversion. That's us. We're the protein diversion. So Mother is the kind of central antagonist in here. And eventually it starts talking to you. This is where the System Shock 2, this is Shodan, but not Shodan. It's an alien, but not quite an alien version of Shodan. So what we learn is that these aliens on the ship and Mother, who is like the leader, the mother, right?
Yeah.
Were eventually from Earth. They were abducted in some way. Then they eventually grew to, I guess, replace the original civilization on the ship. And now they're harvesting humans for food. That's what they're doing. And you learn that they seeded the planet to allow life to bloom so that they have a continuous food source on the planet. So before we get too much further than that, I always love when you have these weird sci-fi human origin stories, right? Humans were not the product of a magical process of evolution or the product of intelligent design. They're just, intelligent design, but to be food for aliens.
Yeah, like they're not here for any kind of purpose. There's no greater plan for their lives. It is just to be food.
Right. And so all the stuff we talked about, all the cultures and all that stuff, the aliens keep coming back. And I think in one of those like radio conversations, you may hear of like someone who knows about similar incidents in the past where these aliens have come because it's time to gather up food. And so that's what this is. It takes a while to get to that point. When I lay it out like that, it's not that complicated, but it's fun. It's a fun reason for aliens to be abducting humans.
And I personally feel like the story would have felt more impactful and interesting if Tommy would have cared. But like as you had said before, he spends so much time just not giving a shit, and like he just wants to save Jen. Even once he gets to Jen and then gets separated again, all he cares about is just getting to her. Even though I'm like, are you listening to this too, Tommy? Because I'm listening to these audio recordings and this is really interesting, but he just doesn't he doesn't care. He does not care.
And so not only is this mother who used to be human a long, long time ago, you find this other civilization on the ship that were abducted a long time ago, again, but not as long as mother, apparently. And they have kind of like been living in hiding on the ship, and they have their own society and civilization living in the shadows, trying to avoid contact from the aliens. And you meet their leader, El Huit, I think is her name. And she's trying to tell you like, and they are, obviously they got abducted a long time ago. So they were also indigenous, which is the connection. And Tommy's grandfather kind of like points this out to Tommy again. He doesn't care. Yeah. Like, I think you're right. Like the fact that Tommy cares so little about discovering lost civilizations on an alien ship.
Yeah.
It puts it all on me to be like, oh, actually, that's pretty cool. Tommy, you should probably care a little bit more about this.
Right.
It probably would have been a little better if Tommy cared about anything except Jen.
Right.
Like literally anything.
It felt like there was going to be so much promise for him, like from the indigenous perspective of how much he was running from it and he didn't like it, and his dichotomy with Jen and how she wants to stay and her heritage is important to her. But then like he becomes, literally just the, what's the term? Like, like he's the player character. Like there's no personality. It comes out in these cutscenes that he's pissed off and he hates this and he wants to be with Jen and that's it. But it's like, if you didn't have, like they set him up really well and then they just kind of like, hey, he's just the body that you're in while you're playing. Because I feel like there could have been so many great stories to like really continue and to like dive into if Tommy would have cared. Like if he would have like really paid attention. Because like, as you talk about the people who have been there that you run into, like how wild is that they were abducted and because you had talked about it before in the non-spoiler section about how like Tommy's thing that he was chained up in, it didn't just malfunction. those people who have been living in, the access tunnels of the ship, they
Yeah.
freed him.
Yeah.
Like, they stopped it so he could get out. So, like, how long have they just been living in this ship?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, that's such an interesting aspect. But when he meets them, he's like, who the hell are you?
Yeah.
I'm trying
Where's
to find
Jen?
my girlfriend.
Yeah.
Where's Jen?
Yeah.
And it's not like, well, wait a minute. You saved me because you know how this works, because you've been here all this time. What have you been doing this whole time? Wait, you stole their tech. You figured out how to make portals. It took you that. Like,
Yeah.
there's
Yeah.
like so much that he just doesn't ask questions, and he just does not care.
Yeah. The Eloit's like, we need your help. We've stolen over the years, pieced together technology. We can form a portal to get off of the ship. And Tommy's like, yeah, I do not care. Where is Jen?
Yeah.
Help me find Jen. And yeah, you're right. Like, he should be asking some questions. He should be like, what can I learn from these people?
Yeah.
That's going to help? Because spoiler alert, in the spoilers section of the show, he finds Jen, but he doesn't save her. So like, maybe if he asked a few questions, he would have been able to save her instead of what actually does happen to her. You're right.
I know you said we're going to be jumping around.
Yeah,
but I had
that's
just
fine.
remembered that I've actually played this game. Okay, not played this game 3 times. That's wrong. I played that part with Jen, the finale of Jen.
Right, the monster. Yeah.
Yeah, I played that part 3 times because the first time I played it, I could not believe that after all this time, I have to kill her.
Yeah.
And so I was like, I'm not doing that. I distinctly remember I loaded up the save, played through it all again. And if you just try to just let Jen live, mother kills Jen. In case anybody wanted, this is spoiler time.
Okay. Yeah. Interesting. Okay. Because I had that hesitation too. So like, if anyone's just listening along, you eventually catch up to Jen. You find her, you rescue her, and then she gets kidnapped again because you left to go do something else. And then when you find her again, Jen's not much of a character with any kind of agency at all, in any way, really. Except at the beginning when she tells those guys in the bar to fuck off.
She has character and then they throw it away.
Other than that, yeah. So like eventually she gets grafted onto one of these alien monsters, and you have to do a boss fight where she's telling you to like go away, to leave and stuff like that, but you have to kill her. And so I had that hesitation too, where I was like, the boss fight's over. I won the fight. The alien part of her is dead, but you can't like rip her out of it or something like that. No. So I was just kind of like staring, like, what am I supposed to do here? Cause I was like, I don't want to just, shotgun blast her. So I shot her with the spirit bow, cause I thought that might be like, something spiritual magic would save her. It killed her. But it's interesting to know that if you don't do anything, that mother will take care of her for you.
Yeah. And it's like, and I'm blanking, obviously, because it's been a long time, on all of the dialogue, but it's something along the lines of like, you don't have what it takes. Maybe I thought you were wrong. Like that. Like, I just remembered that because the whole time leading up to it, she's impressed by you.
Yeah.
And then
it's like Shodan, where she's like you said, she's kind of impressed, but she also thinks you're a little piece of shit. She's constantly insulting you as you go through the story. But yeah, you're right. Like, she's like, I might have a use for you, but if you don't do it, she's like, you don't have what it takes, I guess.
Yeah. I also thought it was really Mother, the character herself was really interesting, because I was hoping that there was going to be more into her in her backstory, because she talks about how she has immortality. Yeah. But then she talks about how she's just tired. She just doesn't want to do this.
She wants you to take her place. That's the goal.
And so I'm like, why? Like, what is, and it, maybe it's like, Asa doesn't really matter, but I'm like, why does it matter? Like, why does she doesn't want to do it anymore?
Yeah. I mean,
you have all this
immortality.
Power.
Yeah. I mean, immortality, I don't know how long she's been at it, but she's been at it for a long time. So I don't know, maybe she just wants to She wants to rest. Like, there's a lot of stories about immortality where, like, one of the lessons that you learn is that, yeah, it'd be cool for a while, but eventually you'd be like, man, this fucking sucks. Or like, I'm tired of all this. Even if it is, you know, doing evil alien shit like Mother's doing in this
Yeah.
game. Like, they don't portray Mother as sympathetic in any way. It's just us reading into like, why does she want a replacement, I guess.
Yeah. And I think like my yearning to know that is also because we didn't get a sequel. And
Yeah.
and yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. The game ends with the message, Prey will return. And it did
didn't.
return, but it's not a sequel to this game.
Yeah. And you know what? I didn't play Arkane's Prey because I found out that it is in no way related to the 2006 Prey. So I'm like, well, I'm out.
It's in space, and you start with a wrench, and that's about where the similarities end.
Okay.
It is an incredible game, though. Like, I have almost nothing but praise for that game, but it is not the sequel to this game for sure.
And that's what I wanted.
So Tommy, along the way, not curious, and again, I think the reason Jen dies is probably because he didn't ask enough questions. He didn't open himself up to trust anybody. And there is that kind of spiritual hero's journey that he's still denying all of that when Jen dies.
Yeah.
Only after Jen dies, he decides that now he has room in his life for his roots and his culture and the things that his grandfather's trying to teach him the whole time. It makes me think that like, her dying is a convenient reason for him to suddenly start caring about the stuff his grandfather's trying to say. But also, she died because he was denying basically anyone who was trying to help him along the way. The only reason he went along with what El Huit and the, I forget what they call them, but the people that have lived on the ship, the only reason he goes along and helps them is because they say they can help get him and Jen off the ship.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, fine, I'll go find the tech that you need. But other than that, he doesn't care. And that's what leads to him losing the only thing he cares about.
And I think like with Tommy specifically as a whole, and well, Tommy and Jen, let me rephrase that. It's also very tropey. Jen is just a vessel for Tommy to do things.
Damsel in distress.
The damsel in distress, what's the other trope? The, you know, like the woman in the icebox, or like the vengeful moment, because, and that's, I think, and that's also another gripe of mine with Tommy, where I got to be a little bit disconnected from him, was like, yes, all this wild shit is happening and you're just like not caring and not paying attention. But then also like, you only care about finding Jen, and then you find Jen and Jen dies, and now you just want revenge because Jen, it's all about Jen, but we're not getting any more like development. It's like everything kind of character growth wise felt like super, empty and hollow. Where there was so much potential and like you're hoping to get more. Yeah.
I just think it's because he flips the switch so quickly, and it's not, I mean, he says that he cares about his heritage, and he says that, you know, he's ready to learn and all that stuff, but it's only after she dies that he's like, okay, I'm ready for, it's almost like he's reluctantly like, well, I don't have anything else, I might as well reconnect with my culture at the end there. Like, I don't know how you felt about it, but it felt very, I wasn't like fully on board with Tommy's spiritual journey and his reconnection here, because it was so obvious that he didn't care about this. Yeah. And then now it's like, maybe I can use this to get revenge. And then that's going to be the thing, you know?
That's what I was talking about at the top of the show, when I was like, you know, the reclamation moment fell so flat for me because he doesn't care. Because I was really seeing myself in Tommy in the beginning, and the way that I came back into my culture was a very big emotional moment. You know, like I got pulled back in because I was having a kid. And I was like, and it instantly felt important. It's wild how like I was like, oh no, this is important. I have to pass it down to future generations. It's up to me to like, to get into it. But for him, it was just like, okay, I'm really angry. You gave me a cool bow and like some powers. Maybe it's gonna do more for me. And he's like, now I care about being Cherokee. Now I care about my culture. And I'm like, but only because you want to get more powers to win? Like,
Yeah.
and then like you get to the very end where you're with Jen again, and you're with grandfather in the spirit world, and it's like, no, you have to go back. If I would have been in that moment where he didn't say shit to Jen, the one that
Yeah.
he's cared about this whole time, the one who cares about this culture, and here you are in the spirit world with your grandfather and the love of your life again because of your culture and the beliefs of your people. And there's nothing. He's not crying. He's not upset. He's not emotional at all. Like there's just, and that's where I was like, it's not the best Indigenous representation, but it's one of the best that we have in like the first half of it. And then like, it just, it was really disappointing. And I think like that is kind of like the theme for me when it comes to the story as a whole. It's like there's just so much building up and you feel so much potential, but they just don't dive into anything. And maybe it's because I'm a storyteller as well, that I'm like, but give us more. I want more. Because I do, even to this day, like replaying it, I was like, shit, like I give me a graphic novel, give me an anime, like live action. I want to be in this world more because there's so many unanswered questions and there's so much potential with so many of these characters, especially Tommy. I'm like, that reclaiming your culture is such a big deal.
Yeah.
That dude did. He didn't
To
give
say
two
it lightly.
shits.
Yeah. Yeah. It is, like you said, he's suddenly ready to do it because I think he realizes that he can probably get some more powers that are going to help him get off the ship or get revenge or whatever he really cares about.
Yeah.
But there was really no point in the story, even after he like came back to it, where I felt like he really cared and he was like truly connected. And maybe that's why they sent his ass back to the living world at the end of the game, where he goes to the spirit world and he sees them, like you said, and they tell him he can't stay there. He has to go back to the living world, even though what happened right before that was he flew the spaceship into the sun.
So fucking cool.
So it was very cool. I loved watching it.
I was like, yeah.
But it's like, how much more dead can you possibly be after flying directly into the sun? Like, he's dead. Why can't live in the spirit world with them? Maybe because he's not fully, not fully there spiritually. I don't know.
The thing is, and this is where it kind of gets into like a spiritual conversation, depending on, what religions or what spiritualities, you're into. But that is a common thing of like, you have unfinished business. And I think that another reason why a second game would have been so great, because, okay, Tommy didn't give a shit. That through and through, he reclaimed his culture, but he still didn't really give a shit. But he listened, and the thing is he finally actually listened to his grandfather at the very end, when his grandfather was like, you have to destroy it. Like, you have to. And he's like, okay. That's like the most redeeming thing that he had this whole time, is that he took that shit and he flew his ass into the sun. And I was like, thank you. Okay. He did something he was supposed to do. And even though it's like, oh, does this balance his karmic energy? No, like he still missed the point of his journey on Earth in this vessel of a body, and I think that duality is kind of played throughout, as you're spirit walking and you are, projecting yourself out. Like, your body is a vessel for your spirit to inhabit. And that vessel didn't learn what it needed. Your spirit, like, you didn't learn what you needed to learn and do what you needed to do in this life. So
Mm-hmm.
you got to go do it again. And for them to have a post-credit scene, before 2 years before Marvel, because Iron Man was 2008, I believe,
Oh
when it
yeah,
came to
right around then.
theaters.
Yeah.
Like, we're getting a post-credit scene when that's not even like a thing. And so, like,
Mm.
it just sets up this moment for, oh, what are we going to do now? Because now I'm kind of invested into Tommy, because he didn't give a shit, but then he did something that had redemptive qualities. And
Yeah.
now he's being forced, because grandfather and Jen are like, no, your work is not done. You got to go back.
Yeah.
You got to do this life again, kind of thing. Damn. And then we just didn't get another one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I can see how a sequel would have maybe shown him like continuing on that path for sure. Because when we talk about his reclamation or his big moment, all that really happens is he goes back to the spirit world. He tells his grandfather he's ready to learn, but then they get attacked by aliens in the spirit world. So he has to shoot some stuff and get out of there.
Yeah.
And then there's a moment where there's this lieutenant called the Keeper that tells you about the origins of life on Earth, and he says it says humans were created to be a food source, therefore they own you. And Tommy says nobody owns me. I'm a warrior of the Cherokee Nation. And then they have the fight. That's it. That's the reclamation. That's the only thing that the game really does as far as that's concerned.
Mm-hmm.
And then he fights Mother. He flies the thing into the sun, talks to them in the spirit world, then goes back to Earth. So like when we say that he completed the hero's journey in the game, he reclaimed his roots, is really just like at the starting line of that. And I can easily see how a sequel would have continued that to the point where maybe at the end of Prey 2, maybe he could have gone to live with them in the spirit world or something like that.
Yeah. Wow. See, I have half a mind to just find out who owns the rights to this story
I was
and
going to say, right,
ask,
do it yourself.
like, let me write it, because I will write it. Because then you get into the later section, that last part of the game. I think it's like a few missions before you're done, where you're back in the spirit realm. You get that last power, which is like a spirit shield around your body that doesn't stop that much more damage. If we can talk about that, like, that was such a waste of time.
I don't think I ever used it.
Well, it just turns your red into white. I don't know if you remember, like, your little health bar.
I
And
can, yeah, okay.
it's like a little bit of extra cushion, but really not much. But anyways, Mother says, I've been trying to get here. Thank you for leading me here. Or something to that effect. So,
To the
like,
spirit world.
right.
Yeah.
So, like, she knows, she understands, but as an immortal person stuck in the physical realm, she knows that there is so much in the spirit realm that would make things better, more powerful, and somehow she uses Tommy as a conduit to enter. That section didn't quite make sense to me, because it was never really explained how they just entered into the spirit realm.
Yeah, I don't know. It might have been like, I don't know how Tommy got there, because he can't, it doesn't seem like he just goes there whenever he wants to throughout the, like, not talking about spirit walking, but when you actually go to that spirit world location and talk with the grandfather and all that stuff. So yeah, that doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me, but maybe it was like the way that Tommy went in there, Mother could follow because she was watching or something like that. I don't know.
See, and from a cultural perspective, we can enter into that spiritual plane, through meditation and certain practices. you know you you can mentally and spiritually, put yourself in that place. And so from a cultural perspective, I understood it. I was like, oh yeah, okay, like, this makes sense. How the aliens got there,
Yeah.
no clue, unless
Yeah.
they would have, like, done something to Tommy to then, but that was never exactly, explicitly said.
Mm-hmm.
even though she kept saying like, I've been training you, I've been letting you get this far. And that I
Yeah.
agree with. But
Mm-hmm. She just wants Tommy to get to the end so that he can take the place as the all powerful, leader of the aliens or whatever. Um, and I don't know. Yeah, it's kind of sloppy how it all comes together with the the culmination of the journey. It's like if you think of the steps of the hero's journey, um, he he was stuck on like step 4 for the entire game up until like an hour left to go, and then it's like
yeah,
we zoom through the rest of it, and then we get to the. But I think it is supposed to be how like he gets to the end and he's started on like the rest of the journey, not necessarily that he's fully formed at the end of it.
yeah,
As they said, you've still got work to do, and they probably mean that in a bunch of different ways.
yeah,
You've got aliens left to kill, but you've also got to continue working on yourself and learning about our culture and your practices and things like that he was pushing away for so long.
yeah, yeah, man, yeah.
What could have been?
What
I
could have
do
been?
think
What could have been?
I finished this game, you know, if there was a Prey 2, I would not have jumped straight into it, after I played
Mhm.
this. But after having this conversation, I do see how Prey 2 could have taken the story into a more interesting way, because Tommy wouldn't be such a dick for,
Mhm.
80% of Prey 2 if
Yeah,
they continued with him.
and I think if we were to revisit Prey in a modern day setting, and I don't mean
Mm,
like modern day as far as like actually playing in modern day, but I mean with modern day mechanics and design
yeah.
philosophies, we could have seen something with more of that Bethesda touch when it comes to the story. Like really hammer on and focus on those story beats, because there were just so many loose ends. It honestly, like playing through Prey feels like watching Lost, where there's
Mhm.
just like all of these questions. And when it finally gets all said and done, you're like, I guess I'll take it.
Yeah.
It's not the answer that I feel like I really need, but I'll accept it because it's the answer. Um,
Hmm.
but I feel like if they were to make a sequel to this game now, there's so much potential because, as an industry, we're more accepting of those really story heavy experiences. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, there's so much potential here.
Yeah. No regrets about the game that we actually got. From my perspective,
No.
the Prey 2017,
Oh, 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 oh.
that game is incredibly good. But I do think, like, had they made a direct sequel to that with even the way games were in 2017, which is getting to be a while ago now, as well, um, then I think you're right. Like, we could have seen some real cool stuff, especially, visually. Maybe they tighten up the way it feels to play the game. There would probably be, well, that's not necessarily true, because they did consult, like you said. I was going to say there would be more consulting and authenticity available for
Mhm.
story writers. They may have had to search a little bit in 2006 to ask the right people the right questions.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm glad that like other people are able to do it though.
Mhm.
It falls on the indies per usual to
Yeah.
really get representation in. And the cool thing about indies too is that you don't have to wait until some studio decides they want to tell your story.
Mhm.
You can tell your story, which is cool now too.
Yeah. Yeah, that's very true. That's very true. Especially when you think about all of the to kind of, put it more macro, like all of the different games that we grew up with that never got to see the light of day again, or like to
Hmm.
to get a sequel. And now you're seeing the indies really taking that hold and making spiritual successors, and like, hey,
Yeah.
this is
Yeah.
where things could have gone. Yeah, it's a great moment. If anybody is listening to this and they're thinking about making a spiritual successor to this game, like an actual a
Uh
sequel,
huh.
hit me up. Hit me up
Yeah.
because I'm ready to write that. I'm not even kidding.
Absolutely. Yeah. Was there anything else about, full spoiler talk story gameplay, anything else you wanted to hit on before we wrap this up?
Yeah, a brief touch of multiplayer. I remember
Oh yeah.
having so much. I didn't try it this time. I don't know if the servers are still up. I can't imagine they are. PC, I believe they are on PC through some fancy footwork,
Mm.
but I had a lot of fun with it there. I think the feeling of the boomer shooter that I've been talking about this whole time, you feel it
Mm-hmm.
more
In
fluidly in the
multiplayer.
multiplayer, which is a bummer because I feel like if you would have gotten a chance to do that, you would have been like, oh, okay, this makes more sense because it keeps everything so tight. I really do think it was them trying to add 2006 game design to 1990 like mechanics. Like it just
Mm-hmm.
didn't translate super well. But yeah, as far as like, gameplay spoiler wise, we had talked about music within the game. I think that one boss fight, the first time you see one of those titans with the horns and the double machine gun
Yeah.
arms, you go through this point where like the fight is grueling. It's impossible. Like you actually can't beat it
Yeah.
until you're cowering away, and it's this odd, like it feels like this cinematic scripted moment
Yeah. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
that type of feeling. I'm like, why didn't you keep this throughout the whole game? Like you're really grinding your head against this boss that's just not working. And it's almost like the design literally forces you to hide. And in your hiding, here comes Talon landing on this monitor. And so you try to close it, doesn't work, get into the spirit, then you shoot it and it cuts the arm off. And
Yeah.
now you're using the arm against it. And it's like this really badass moment that like I wish that they would have had more music behind that, like, more musical
Mm-hmm.
moments to really fill that in. Because again, like if you go listen to the soundtrack, it's like, wow, this is a great track. I wish that they would have played it louder because I could have like felt something. Um,
Mm-hmm.
so I wish that would happen. And then the second point is like, man, that was such an ingenious design point to like move you along to introduce you to a new weapon
Yeah.
and to kind of show you how to use it against a giant enemy that you've never seen before.
Mm-hmm.
And while that's like a classic shooter moment in design, they didn't keep that. Like the next big gun that you got after that, I believe maybe was the shotgun.
Yeah. Sounds right. You just find it.
You just find it. It's
Yeah.
just sitting there. You just pick
Mm-hmm.
it up and it's like, well,
It's
that
where we
kind of
keep our
like
shotguns. Yeah.
yeah, like that really sucks. And then even like when you get the rocket launcher, these flying like Jabba the Hutt Mojo enemies are just like shooting these rockets at
Oh.
you all the time.
Oh my God.
And you don't even realize that they're also like actually blocking you because they're putting up like this bubble force field for a second.
Uh-huh.
And then you pick up that gun, like it's like a little bit better of a moment, but it's still not great. Like you
Mm.
kill a bunch of those and then you're in a room where a bunch of them are dead and then you pick it up off a table. It's
Mm-hmm.
honestly not better than the shotgun at all because you're still just picking it up, but at least like there's a little bit more context clues.
Yeah.
But yeah, like, and then there's just, it's like you had this killer intro, you have these like great gameplay moments throughout, and it's like, what you couldn't have like kept that going the whole time,
Mm.
like really put. Yeah, it's just like I really would have hoped for some of that stuff to happen. I still think it's a great game, and everybody, especially if you like shooters, should play it. But it's the Last Jedi. There's a lot of like poignant, memorable, kick-ass moments that are just like strung together with some mediocrity. Um,
Yeah. And
but
I think that big Titan fight that you mentioned it may not be the first boss fight, but it's one of the first, like
yeah,
big true boss fights in the game. And you're definitely right. Like the way they designed that to lead you to that weapon is really smart because you're going to try out all your guns. They're not going to do shit,
mm-mm,
and you're going to run out of ammo, and you're going to see that little side room has ammo in it. That's how they lead you in there.
yeah,
It's got ammo. and then you find the thing, you find the console, you chop off the arm, you got a new gun. It's a sweet, memorable moment. And then none of the boss fights have stuff like that again. They're just kind of like a big monster in a room. Like even when you fight the Keeper, it's just you fight him in a room. There's pillars. You hide behind the pillars. You pop out and shoot. There's nothing special about that fight.
Yeah.
The final boss fight has this weird gimmick where you shoot the little like hexagon barriers around the
barrels that you let them off, and it like takes your shield down, and
that's it. It's not like I don't know, like we talked earlier about the set piece moments with the licensed songs in the jukebox and how they really feel like they use those really effectively early in the game. And then the first boss fight is another like really smart, creative boss fight. And then the creativity, it's not like they never create fun stuff after that, but the most memorable stuff as far as gameplay, sequences, set pieces, encounters go, it's pretty front loaded.
Yep.
So it feels like as they're building the game out, they used all their best ideas really early on in the game. And then afterwards, they still had some fun stuff and some cool locations and stuff like that, but never anything truly as memorable. Like if you ask me in, 6 months, what boss fights do I remember in Prey? I'll remember that first one, and I'll remember the last one, and I'll probably forget everything else.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe fighting Jen because you're fighting Jen.
Yeah.
But that's the way the boss is designed. That, from a gameplay perspective, you just circle, strafe, and shoot. There's nothing creative going on there.
Right.
So you're totally right.
Yeah.
It's a really interesting game. I think the spoiler section's been a lot more negative than the non-spoiler section, which is interesting. But this game has a lot going for it and has a lot that it could definitely do better. And like we said, a lot that could have probably been done better if they had the chance to make that sequel, iterate on what they did the first time. We'll never know unless some angel indie developer decides they want to take a crack at it.
This episode as a whole, I think is super important because you're right. Like we've been a lot more critical in the spoiler section in the first part, but I think that's Prey. Like Prey has in the first half so much going for it, so much that they have set up. There's so much promise. You can see the bones. It feels good in some areas, but then. It's kind of like I said, The Last Jedi. There's some people who praise that movie as the best movie in the Star Wars franchise, and then some that are like, that movie's dog shit. But either way, you can agree that there are cool moments throughout, but that there's problems in the middle. And that I think this episode just really highlights the game in its totality. And I would still, even after all of my criticisms, still suggest people play it. And I will probably replay it, in another 10, 5, 10, 15 years, because it's just, it's a fun world to get into, and you're pulled in with the promise. Does the promise pay off? Not really, but it's an interesting ride to get there.
Yeah. I could see myself at least replaying the first couple hours because that's where a lot of the real cool stuff is for sure. But yeah, I think you're right. I think that the way we talked about the game kind of mirrors what the game is at its heart, for sure. So I appreciate you coming on this ride with me and talking about this game. This has been awesome.
Yeah, I've loved it, man. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. And at the end, as always, I'll give the call for everybody to check down in the show notes again for everything that Asa is doing. You'll be able to find, like we said, voice acting, game development, content creation, all kinds of stuff going on. Consultation, if you need a consult, hit Asa up. We'll definitely help you out. And all that's left to say is, if you're listening all the way to the end, you are my hero, and tune in next week for the next game to come out of the backlog.
Do you have a gaming subscription service like Xbox Game Pass or a crazy backlog and don't know what to play next? Well, 1H1D might be for you. Join me, Chris, and my college buddy Tom as we play a random game or a requested game for an hour and decide if it's worth playing past that hour. We go over the good, the bad, and maybe some little tidbits about the development you might not have known. Got 30 minutes? Give us a try, and if you like it, throw us a 5-star review. Try something new. You never know what might be your next favorite game.
Welcome to No Small Games, the indie gaming recap and review podcast. I'm Kate, also known as Cater Blossom.
And I'm Emily. You might also know me online as The Specific Egg.
And we met streaming and playing video games on Twitch.
At No Small Games, we combine our favorite genres to experience everything the indie game world has to offer and share it with all of you. We believe there are no small games, only small game studios.
Each episode, we'll choose one indie game that we each played separately and discuss our playthrough experience together.
The good, the bad, and our most memorable moments. We'll follow our recap with a review and announcement of which indie game will be featured on our next episode.
We invite you to play each game along with us and would love to hear from you about your playthrough experience.
Hey, Kate.
Hey, Emily.
I hope that No Small Games brings everyone some big fun.